Good morning. Today we look at Mark 15, verses 1 through 25. This is a very, a hard reading. I mean, hard to read, hard to have to read it all of the time. It begins with, in the morning. Jesus has been being questioned by the Pharisees, the religious leaders, throughout the night, which, according to the Jewish laws, Jewish traditions, he shouldn't have been, this was when they shouldn't be doing it. You don't have a trial at night. You do it in the light of the day. But Jesus had spent the night after his arrest in the garden that we talked about on Saturday. And the scribes, the chief priests hold a consultation, it says, with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And so this is the Sanhedrin, is what the council was called. This was all of the leaders of the group. And they bound Jesus, it says, and led him away and handed him over to Pontius Pilate. And so they must have had some communication with Pilate, because he asks Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus' answer is, "You say so." And then the religious leaders begin to accuse Jesus of all kinds of things. And, Jesus doesn't answer. And Pilate says to him, "See all these charges? What are you going to say? What is your position? Speak up for yourself." And, that's in a court of law. You have your accuser there, the prosecuting attorney that lays all of this out, and then you have the defense attorney. So Pilate says, "What is your defense against all of these charges that these people are bringing?" And, verse 5, Jesus made no reply, so that Pilate was amazed. You think about that, if you are accused of something, right or wrong, you're going to defend yourself. You're going to defend your actions. You're going to speak. You're not just going to stand there and let people, have at you that way. But Jesus makes no response. He has had his mind set on Jerusalem. He has been in the garden and prayed to God and asked for deliverance if possible, and has come to knowing that, this is the way it's going to be. And, it's so hard to see Jesus in that position that he, just accepts this horrific thing that's going to happen to him. And Pilate, calls this man Barabbas, who was in prison, because, it reminds us, Mark does, that it was the custom of the Roman government to release a prisoner, to set someone free at the Jewish time of Passover, just as this, big event was going on. And Pilate did his best to try to free Jesus. He said, here's this horrible man who is accused of murder, insurrection. He's not the kind of guy that you want to have released. This Barabbas was a bad person. And yet the religious leaders had the people stirred up to call out to release Barabbas. And then he asked, then what do you wish me to do with the man you call King of the Jews? And their shouts were, "Crucify him, crucify him." And it's just, it hurts so bad. To think that, this is on Friday morning now. It was just, not even a week ago that these same people had been cheering for Jesus on that day we call Palm Sunday. They had been hailing him as the king, as the Hosanna, and just so eager every day to hear his words, to bring the sick, the lame, and all of these to Jesus. And here, all of a sudden, it's crucify him. How can they change so quickly? How can someone who has been helped so much, or someone who has had a friend helped so much by Jesus, turn against him that way? It doesn't make any sense at all. but yet for some reason, it comes into play, and it puts God's plan, to completion, that Jesus would then be crucified on the cross. And, so the shouts are, "Crucify him," and Pilate, what evil has he done? And he doesn't get a response other than the crowd cheering, and just, I don't know if I should say cheering, but crying out, "Crucify him." And so it says, after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, and they called together the whole cohort. That would be 480, 600, 480 in a cohort, 600 some in a legion. I don't remember all of those numbers, but they had a lot of soldiers there, mocking and flogging, and dressed him in this purple cloak, and put the crown of thorns on his head, and began saluting him and spitting on him, and, "Hail, King of the Jews." What a mocking sound they had, and just, and as much as they were mocking him, they had the title right. They had the title right. Jesus is the King of the Jews. Not just was, but he is. He is the King. He is the Savior. He is the one. It has been and always will be. And they beat him with a reed, knelt down, and mocking him. Finally took that purple gown off of him and led him out to be crucified. And Mark's gospel tells us too, they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, to carry Jesus' cross. And it tells us that Simon of Cyrene was the father of Alexander and Rufus. And these two, Alexander and Rufus, become followers of Jesus, as Simon of Cyrene is very well believed that he was one who knew of Jesus and trusted and believed in Jesus. And so Alexander and Rufus, his sons, follow in the path of their father and believe in Jesus Christ and serve him. They bring Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They offer him wine mixed with myrrh, and they crucified him, divided his clothes, casting lots. And the last thing we read today, it was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. I look at my clock and it says about 9:08. So it was about this time of the day. We're in Central Daylight Time, and halfway around the world. But at about this time in the morning, they crucified Jesus, put him on the cross. That's where we end reading today. And it's, as I said, it's always a hard reading to read of the death. And, sometimes when we just read it, we can read a lot of things, and they can kind of go in through our eyes and hit our brain and just kind of not impact us. But I don't know how this story cannot impact someone. Anybody that believes in Jesus as Lord and Savior has got to just hurt inside to know the pain, the anguish that Jesus went through on that journey to the cross for you and for me, the mocking, everything that he put up with. How these people who had been his followers turned against him. Well, it's kind of like I talked about yesterday with Jesus lamenting over Jerusalem, killer of the prophets. How the people, would be eager for a while to hear the word of the prophet, or eager to follow God, eager to again be called children of God and follow their God, but soon they would be turned away by idols and by this and that, and by, where are you, God? And when we ask, where are you, God? The best answer is to say that God is in Jesus Christ, with his arms spread on the cross for you and for me. That's the God that we worship. That's the God of our salvation. It's the God of our hope, the God of our promise. But yet, as they hung him on the cross that morning, it had to seem like the end. And so, as we read this story for the second time this year, we'll read it 3 more times during, Luke's Gospel and John's Gospel, and then again on Easter itself. And it doesn't ever get any easier, but the promise is always there. Promise is always there that Jesus did what God's will was, and his act of his selfless act on the cross was for you and me.